It's the Detroit Lions and the San Francisco 49ers playing each other in the NFC Championship game this Sunday. And one of the matchups that has been discussed on a lot of shows, and rightfully so, is the quarterback matchup. Detroit Lions have Jared Goff. The 49ers have Brock Purdy. In a lot of ways, they've had similar seasons. They're kind of have a similar role on their team. But Detroit Kool-Aid, I'm going to go to you first.
Yes, sir.
Which team has the advantage, or which quarterback has had the better season? Just like all-encompassing.
You know what? And I think which one is going to kind of have the upper hand on Sunday. I think it's the one that hasn't made any turnovers in the postseason. And that's Jared Goff. For as much as Brock Purdy has had some success this season, and obviously with the 49ers being the number one seed, we've seen them kind of slow down just a little bit, and I believe it's been because of him. Obviously, you get to this point, but they had that scare against the Green Bay Packers. But as it relates to the Lions, I never feared any of these games. Obviously, against Stafford, there's going to be some emotion that's there, but I didn't fear them losing that game. And the way that Jared Goff looked, especially kind of kind of handling things in that second half, even though the offense kind of stalled and failed to score more than 3 points, he made the throws that he had to make, especially on that last drive to ice things away and in the game in victory formation. The way that he looked against the Bucs, especially in the second half of that game, Jared Goff to me is going to have this upper hand over Brock Purdy. And ultimately, I believe it's due to the fact that he's going to continue to play clean football.
Oh, man, if he plays clean football, I mean, the Lions are almost unstoppable, especially their offense. JB, I'm going to go to you next. Jared Goff or Brock Purdy, who has the advantage in this matchup?
I like what Kool-Aid said there. The turnovers in the postseason. Jared Goff, we haven't seen anything, and I believe he's just getting better game by game. He's getting a lot more comfortable. He's getting back to the old Jared Goff from the Rams when he took them to the Super Bowl as well too, and I think that's going to help him as well. Just being able to say that I've been here before, I know the pressure, I know what comes with each and every single one of these games, and I'm not going to let that get to me. I've been there before, and I'm going to help this team go there as well too. So I think it's a little less pressure for Jared Goff, and I think that takes the tension off, and it gives him a little bit more ease to kind of just bring this whole team along with them and say, hey, you know what? We got this. Let's not panic about anything. We've had the lead in every single game this postseason, so let's continue on.
You know, I like the angle you said about it because I would agree that Jared Goff has less pressure than Brock Purdy, and I get it, they're both young quarterbacks, but I think the San Francisco 49ers are on a team that has experienced some very recent playoff heartbreak and maybe underachievement. Last year was more due to injury, but they've lost a Super Bowl recently. They lost an NFC Championship recently to Matthew Stafford and the Rams, and I think with the Lions, we think that their window is going to be open for longer when you consider their cap situation. Their players are younger, and a lot of those 49ers players are past the age of 30. Like Trent Williams is old. He's still playing well, but he's old. George Kittle is past the age of 30. Deebo Samuel has had a lot of health issues. But KG, I'm going to go to you next. Jared Goff or Brock Purdy? Which team has the quarterback advantage?
You know I got to go with my boy Malibu Goff, man.
Yeah.
But just much like JB said, he's been here. He knows the moment. He knows the stakes. And at this point, I just trust his ability to read a defense a little bit better than Brock Purdy at this point. Another stat that I wanted to bring up that I feel like has been crucial throughout this playoffs through 2 games, Jared Goff's completion percentage is at 75%. And that's no small feat. On top of that, like you said, he has no interceptions, and that's the biggest number. As long as he continues to play smart football and not turn the ball over, I feel like this Lions offense will be just fine. I also pointed out he's only had 2 bad plays this whole playoff run. That was the one fumble that wasn't a fumble in the Rams game, and the touchdown that he almost got to. I think that was Amon-Ra. It almost got picked off by Jamel Dean in the Buccaneers game
in the end zone.
But besides that, he's been absolutely flawless, man. He knows how to rebound after making mistakes, and I just trust that ability more at this point.
Hey, John Macaroon says, is KG allowed to go home? I'm not sure at this point. He may or may not.
It don't seem like it, man.
He may or may not have his own, bunk back there.
They're gonna have to roll a king size in here for me.
Or deny. But I like that. Jared Goff has obviously had a great playoff run. You talk about those 2 plays, but the best part about those 2 plays, and sometimes during these playoff runs, you got to get a little lucky. Jared Goff threw what would have been, or through because it didn't actually happen because it doesn't count as that. It's just a regular incomplete pass. It would have been one of the worst end zone interceptions I've ever seen. But Jamel Jean just like had butterfingers and dropped it. And then obviously that fumble back with that little push pass, it was recovered by the Lions. So sometimes you got to get a little fortunate. Yeah. What interception? What fumble? It didn't happen. It was like J.J. McCarthy at the beginning of the Rose Bowl. What interception? What are you talking about? It didn't happen. It just goes in the books as an incomplete pass. And I love what you guys are saying about Jared Goff. The one thing that I will bring up, because here's the thing, and I hate to be this person because I love the Lions. Jared Goff, and I'll give this caveat at first. Jared Goff has looked far more impressive in the playoffs. I mean, Jared Goff has played pretty much perfect, clean football in both games, and it's been one of the reasons why they've won. Jared Goff has been excellent. Brock Purdy looked shaky at times, missed a lot of throws, the type of throws that Jared Goff was not missing in his game. He got away with a couple ones that could have been disaster picks or pick sixes. Yeah. But we also have to remember, early on in the game, he threw that beautiful 32-yarder to George Kittle, and then when they needed to drive the most, Brock Purdy did execute because Christian McCaffrey was able to keep them afloat. The defense, specifically Dre Greenlaw, made a couple of big plays, but Brock Purdy got it done in the end. But also, one of the things I've heard being talked about on this network, particularly Woodward Nights, shout out to Woodward Nights. Shout out. I think, because I was listening to Booner, and this is not an attack on Booner, he was mentioning how I would say the 49ers have all these all-pros and the Detroit Lions do not. That the 49ers are a more talented team in a lot of ways, that they have the better situation. And I agree that they have a better defense. They have a couple of all-pros on defense. The Lions most certainly do not. They have a top 5 defense in the regular season. The Lions most certainly do not. But offensively, when you look at the talent that each team has, it's more similar than you think. The 49ers, they've got all-pro Christian McCaffrey, all-pro Kyle Juszczyk, all-pro George Kittle, Trent Williams, and Brandon Ayuk. The first 4 are first team. Brandon Ayuk is second team. But you look at the Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown, first team All-Pro. Penei Sewell, best offensive lineman in the NFL, first team All-Pro. Frank Ragnow, second team All-Pro. I believe he's actually the best center in the NFL. Yep. And then Sam Laporta, second team All-Pro. So, and then where Christian McCaffrey is All-Pro and the Lions don't have an All-Pro running back, what they do have is probably the best running back duo in the NFL with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. And when you look at their rushing yards per game, the Christian McCaffrey-led 49ers average 140.5, and the Detroit Lions average 135.9. So my point is that they both have great situations. It's not just that the 49ers is far better than the Lions. I think on paper you could argue that the Lions offense is just as good. And when you dive even deeper into the numbers, and this is me not me crapping on Jared Goff, I promise. In the regular season, Brock Purdy was first in QBR, Jared Goff was 11th. Brock Purdy was first in quarterback rating, Jared Goff was 9th. In yards per attempt, Brock Purdy was first and Jared Goff was 9th. And I'm not saying that to discredit Jared Goff. I just think that people scoff a little bit too much at Brock Purdy like he's just some game manager, like he's not crashing the Ferrari, but act like Jared Goff is elite. I think that they're more similar than you think, and when you dive deeper into the numbers, Brock Purdy did have a better season. But like I said, in the playoffs, the way Jared Goff has played, he has never shined brighter in my book than right now, Kool-Aid.
Yeah. And let's not take Brock Purdy light. Let's not take the 49ers light. I think that this is going to be, obviously, their toughest matchup in the playoffs, the one where they're now underdogs based on the spread. And it's not going to be anything easy for them to face. But I do believe that this Lions team has the recipe to go out there and knock off the San Francisco 49ers and San Fran, man. I don't know. Dan Campbell has absolutely, from the day he got here, instilled this we have no fear aspect, not just in the team, not just in those players that hit that field, but also in the fans as well. I've been very confident with this team since they've kind of gotten towards the back half of the season. Early on, when we were trying to filling things out, and we saw the Seattle Seahawks loss, we saw the loss to the Ravens, there were times we were like, eesh. Well, Thanksgiving, I remember how a lot of us were feeling. But this team has not strung together back-to-back losses all season. They've continued to punch up to their competition. They've continued to find ways to get better. And honestly, what I've really, really, really loved is that when we were saying, they got to do something about this personnel, they have been willing to change up their philosophies and their schemes to try and put people in the best possible position to succeed. And then they hit their stride. going into the later half of the season and going into the playoffs. And when you have a Dan Campbell at it, like I saw Florio talking about I saw fear in Dan Campbell's eyes for the first time when it was 10-10 at halftime. First of all, Florio, take a hike. He can be punted to the same moon that you punted Juwan Howard. All right? That's where he can go. Because that's not what I saw. Dan Campbell came out at half and said, I told the guys this is playoff football. Go do your jobs. And what did they do in that second half? They steeled up and they did their jobs. To say 10-10 at halftime against a team that was really, really hot with as good a defense as theirs, sometimes you got to go at halftime and make those adjustments. And guess what? Our guys did that. And there was no fear, man. None at all.
I am so glad that you mentioned that clown Mike Florio, because here's the thing. What does that even mean that he had fear in his eyes? Because what I saw was a second half in which the Detroit Lions outscored the Buccaneers 21-13. What I saw was them go on a streak where they outscored the Buccaneers 21-7 to take a 14-point fourth quarter lead. Exactly. That doesn't seem... What evidence showed you that he was scared? Because the evidence showed you that the Detroit Lions came out of halftime and played better and won the game. And oh, by the way, that defense, which is the weakness of the Detroit Lions, they got 2 critical stops at the beginning of the half when the Buccaneers got the ball first and then the Lions failed to score and the Buccaneers got the ball back. The Lions defense got those stops and their offense eventually found their stride. So that whole thing about them having fear is that was just such nonsense. And Booner's in the chat, and I just want to give him his chance to respond to me. My point was that from a national outlook, everybody looks at the 49ers as a superior, talented team. And you know what? I agree with that. I think we're in a little bit of I don't even want to say a bubble. It's just that we recognize the team that we have. And when you look at the all-pro teams, for the offensive side of the ball, the Lions got a lot of players too, but as do the 49ers. But on defense, I'll give the 49ers, especially the talent edge they have.
I'm glad you kind of said that, because from the national perspective, a lot of people are kind of looking at the stats of it all. Like I saw somebody post yesterday with a picture of Aaron Glenn. The Lions are giving up this many yards through the air on offense. It's like, but are you actually looking at what they're doing? Over the last 5 games. Well, they won those games. What are we talking about? And they're holding teams to 20, 23 points or less. This is a defense that bends but doesn't break. They get steeled up within the 20s. Between the 20s, they're going to give up some yards because they have to. The personnel, they're not just going to snap their fingers and have like the best DBs in the league. But they're still keeping teams out of the end zone. Why did they beat the Rams? Because they forced them to take field goals every time they got in the red zone. That's what this defense has continued to do. When they shorten that field, honestly, it seems like that's when their defense is at their best. And they're opportunistic, man. We've seen this team win several games this year with game-ending interceptions, man. Like that to me means a lot more than if if Mullins goes out there and passes for 300 yards. You talking about in a loss though? You talking about in a game where they picked him off opportunistically to end these games though? You got to look at exactly what this Lions team is, how they're overcoming their weaknesses, because ultimately every team, I don't care how perfect you think you are, every team has weaknesses. It's about how you play to your strengths and how you overcome those weaknesses, and the Lions are putting that together very, very good right now.
All I know about those 2 Nick Mullins games, I get it. He threw a lot of yards. Justin Jefferson torched us. He also threw 6 interceptions in 2 games. In the Cowboys game, the Lions also forced 2 turnovers. They forced two turnovers against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and against the Rams, in which they didn't force any turnovers. When the Lions got to the red zone 3 times, they scored touchdowns. When the Rams got to the red zone 3 times, they kicked field goals. And they pretty much never let our opposing team's running back do a whole lot of anything. I'm not saying they've shut down everybody completely, but nobody has really gone off this year. So whatever formula they're using, whether it's sending more blitzes, which have worked, but you're going to give up some big plays, they're winning these games. They're pretty much their only loss in the games ever since the only loss in the games in which they made that adjustment, starting with the Broncos game, was against the Cowboys. And we all know,
don't say it.
We all know there's some
we'll put an asterisk on that one.
And it didn't even cost them, because the Lions still got their 2 home playoff games, and the Cowboys did this in the playoffs, which I had more faith in them than some, but I'm still glad to see them choke.
That's what I'm talking about. All of the stats said that Dallas was supposed to move on, right?
Yep.
That's what they want us to look at. That's what the national media wants us to look at. When in reality, it's the teams that's doing it the best right now that's moving on. The teams that are able to minimize their mistakes, play clean football, and honestly play to their strengths, man. That offensive line for the Detroit Lions right now, I think that they're the MVP of this team right now.
Sure.
They have a better offensive line than the San Francisco 49ers, and that's key. And the fact that the Cowboys, they lost they got murdered and they're a wild card matchup against the Packers, it just shows how hard it is to win in the playoffs, and all the more impressive that even though the Lions were the better team and they were at home, they took care of business. It's not that easy.
Sir.
Ask the Dallas Cowboys.